Dear friends, I'm Daron Spielman, and I'm thrilled to share that my new book, When the Stones Speak, is out today. We often talk about October 7th as an intelligence failure, a brutal wake-up call. But there was another failure, one we've ignored far too long. It's the war being fought beneath the ground, in the archaeological layers of Jerusalem. It's a war to erase the proof that the Jewish people have been rooted in this land for thousands of years, long before Islam. Long before ancient Rome and Greece, the Jewish people were already here. This is what I call the eighth front in this war. It's not being fought with missiles, it's being fought with lies. Lies that are being pushed by Palestinian leaders, Arab regimes, and now it's even being echoed on US campuses, all aimed with one goal: to sever the Jewish people from our land and undermine the moral foundations of the West itself. My book, When the Stones Speak, is not just a book about history. It's my firsthand account from the battlefield. I've drawn it from over 2 decades as the vice president of the City of David excavations and my service as an IDF spokesman from being called up on October 7th throughout this war. This is the story that Israel's enemies did not want me to know and they did not want you to know. That's why I wrote this book, When the Stones Speak. Let's dive in. For over 21 years at the City of David, I personally witnessed how even as we were fortifying our borders, our enemies were digging beneath us, not just in Gaza, but underneath biblical Jerusalem to try and bury the truth. With every artifact we uncovered in the City of David, whether they were clay seals or coins, even Hebrew inscriptions, the evidence became undeniable. The Jews have lived. We've ruled. We've worshiped and thrived in Jerusalem for 3,000 years. And every time we brought a stone to light or a discovery, the attacks were sure to follow. The Palestinian Authority and Hamas responded with lawsuits, with riots, and even assassination attempts. Some Western diplomats who were completely obsessed with the failed peace process idea tried pressuring us and pressuring the Israeli government to stop these excavations. Why? Because they knew that these stones prove that the Jews are not colonizers in the land. We are among the most indigenous peoples to any land on earth. So they tried to stop us because they knew that each stone unraveled their decades-long propaganda campaign aimed at erasing Jewish history and indoctrinating generations of Gazans and Palestinians. Today, this war has metastasized far beyond Gaza and Jerusalem into the lecture halls of Harvard, Columbia, and universities, including my own across the West. In April 2025, a Harvard report confirmed what Jewish students already knew. The colonizer narrative is everywhere. Jews are being cast as foreign occupiers, even in our ancestral homeland. This lie has created an openly hostile environment. It completely denies Jewish identity. It fuels anti-Semitism, and it emboldens hate. And we've all seen this in the streets in London, in New York, in Times Square, and on university campuses. President Trump responded by freezing $2.2 billion in federal funding to Harvard after DOJ investigations uncovered institutional anti-Semitism. But friends, this did not start in 2025. It began a century ago with Haj Amin al-Husseini, who was the founder of Palestinian nationalism, who allied with Hitler, with Mahmoud Abbas, today the president of the Palestinian Authority, whose doctoral dissertation denied the Holocaust and implied that Jews, the Zionist movement, colluded with the Nazis in the annihilation of the Jews, or with the Hamas Charter, which rejects any Jewish connection to the land. If they succeeded in rewriting our history, they don't just erase the Jews, they unravel the foundations of the West: truth, justice, and liberty, all of which were founded in Israel. On October 8th, I personally saw this unfolding in front of my eyes. I stood on October 8, 2023 at the site of a destroyed road just on southern Israel between Sderot and the Kibbutzim. This was one day after Hamas's massacre. This was the morning. The smell of blood, fire were still lingering. There were cars on fire. I opened up the doors of one of the cars and took out the driver's registration that the first responders left on the seat so we could identify them, and it was dripping with blood. I looked in the back seat, and there was a baby seat. And the soldier that was with me said, look what you're standing on. I looked down. and I saw I was standing on a pile of white zip ties, and I could not understand why. What are white zip ties doing on the street? He said to me something that riveted me that I'll never forget. His name was Liad, and he said to me, Doron, the people in this car were either killed or taken hostage, and that's how they bound their hands and feet. At that moment, I looked around myself, and I understood what the Al-Aqsa flood actually meant. First of all, the flood, it looked like waves had come into their road in the southern communities and left complete wreckage and death behind it. It was truly a flood of terror. But the question is, why did they call it the Al-Aqsa flood? Not Gaza liberation, not the Palestinian rising, the Al-Aqsa flood. Because this war is not about territory. It is about Jerusalem. It is about memory, it is about identity, and it is about history. Those Hamas terrorists who invaded Israel and the Hezbollah terrorists who are fighting Israel believe that they are delivering justice because they have been raised in a calculated campaign over decades to believe very simply that Jews don't belong here. That is what happens when history is erased. You know, we should have learned our lesson because we know when a people come to erase your history, the next thing they're going to try to do is to try to erase you and me. That is the other front that we missed. And that's why we must fight back with the truth. That is what my book, When the Stones Speak, attempts to do. It shows the systematic efforts of Israel's enemies to try and silence this story, the clear evidence that shows that the Jewish people are indigenous to the land of Israel. This book is a toolkit. It has all of the evidence in it, the discoveries, where they were found, all of the evidence going back to United Nations commissions, including the Palestinian narrative and the original Palestinians that denounced that narrative. The efforts in recent years have even reached the State Department and the White House. They searched for allies to stop the excavations in the city of David. But as the years went on, the evidence only continued to mount. In When the Stones Speak, I go back to when I first saw this battle up close in the city of David. We found an underground tunnel just next to a pool we had discovered called the Shiloh Pool, or the Siloam Pool, at the bottom of the city of David. It was this incredible pool. It's beautiful. It's 1.5 acres in size. I just saw it the other day with excavators slowly digging it out. And what is a tunnel doing in Jerusalem? Well, the archaeologist, Professor Ronnie Reich, he said, you know what? This pool was an ancient ritual bath for people that were going up to the temple itself. They would bathe in purity and walk up that road. But there's only one problem. If you purify in Judaism and then you touch anyone else who's not pure, you now are impure and you have to go back into the pool again. So he said these words, if this is truly a ritual bath, there must be a road for the pure that led from here directly into the sanctity of the temple itself. Well, one day I was at the site and another archaeologist, Eli Shukran, said to me and a group of workers at the city of David, he found the opening to a tunnel. We crawled in that tunnel on our stomachs. I detailed this in the book. It was a horrifying experience to do so. But after around an hour of crawling, we saw over our heads that we were under a road with stairs heading up. We shined the flashlight. We were wearing them, headlights, flashlights. We could see the stone in the staircase going off like a stairway into heaven. And we realized that there's a stairway over our head that one day we're going to excavate that leads all the way from this pool towards the Temple Mount. But before we turned around and left that tunnel, Eli Shukran found a series of clay jars, jugs beneath the ground. And we were surprised. Why are there intact jars beneath a road inside a small little channel? And he said, you know, I think I know what this is from. One of the historians, Josephus Flavius, says that the last 2,000 Jews in Jerusalem that were left after the city was destroyed by Rome, they were hiding. He says it was the young and the elderly. They had nowhere to go. And they made a run for it. And they ran beneath this tunnel. And he writes, the Romans heard there were still Jews. And in the same way that the Nazis went out of their way to kill every last Jew, they ran down, he says, and they tore open this road and they killed the Jews that they found. Directly in this spot, when we excavated the road, we could see the cracks in the actual paving stones that the Romans made. These Jews were the last Jews in Jerusalem. Jews stayed in Israel all the way until the present day. But the last Jews in Jerusalem, after a 1,000-year dynasty that had begun before them by King David in 1000 BCE, and we were exiled 600 years before Muhammad even founded Islam. And this is a seriously irritating fact to Israel's enemies, who have been indoctrinating the youth in Gaza and other Arab countries that there is no Jewish history in Jerusalem. You can hear it on your campuses. And when they saw this evidence come to light, they put a bullseye around us and they said, this is an excavation that has to be stopped. Around 3 months later, and I detailed this in the book, I was driving up the main road in Jerusalem in the city of David, and I heard all the excavating had stopped. It was quiet. You could hear a penny drop. And I passed one of my friends, his name is Ismail, at the site, and I tried speaking to him, where are all the workers, and I could see he was avoiding me. He went down an alleyway. And when I got to the top of the site, I met with the Israel Antiquities Authority, the National Parks Authority, the police, and two representatives of the excavators who were Arab excavators. There were more than 100 Arabs excavating in the city of David, Muslims, Christians, and Jews. The two heads of the excavators, who were Muslim, their cars had been burnt the night before. And a message had been written on all the telephone poles in the city of David, listing the names of every single Arab worker with a threat that if they did not immediately cease excavating this incredible road, there would be consequences. What was the story? Raed Salah, the head of the Muslim Brotherhood in Israel, yes, surprisingly, even though it's outlawed in Egypt, the Muslim Brotherhood was then allowed in Israel, and to some degree it still is being allowed. He issued a call for all Muslims to rise up and stop the pilgrimage road. He claimed fallaciously, it's not true, that the road is going into the Al-Aqsa Mosque. And he threatened our workers. He threatened to stop it. Some of those Arab workers stayed. Sadly, 85 of 100 were too afraid to continue. You know, afterwards I've been spoken to by, all these NGOs or students who come to Israel who have already met with these crazy NGOs who get their funding from Europe and are really just stoked against Israel. And they come with me with all these questions, and I say, you know something? We were paying 100 Arab workers. 85 of them were forced to quit because of intimidation. Did these NGOs you're speaking to find them jobs? Well, I know they didn't, because I'm still in touch with many of these Arab workers, including Ismail. I've even raised money to help these families. These are the people who are protesting against us. They sit in some ivory tower overseas in Europe, hand out money to terrorists and to extreme left-wing NGOs, and they don't really care about the people on the ground. What they care is stopping these excavations, because they know, just like we know, that every day that goes by and every shovel that goes into the ground, it deals a silver bullet directly into the Palestinian lie. That lie says the Jews are colonialists, that we are outsiders and that we are invaders. It is this same intellectual madness that caused those kids in Gaza to grow up to be terrorists. One of my kids said to me, he said, Abba, Dad, where does the world think these Hamas terrorists came from? I mean, they were only a few thousand back in 2006 when they overthrew the Palestinian Authority. He said, these were the kids in Gaza. What caused these kids to grow up into being such terrorists that massacred and raped and killed? It's a horrible story. Now, there's a lot of reasons. Some of it may have to come with the version of Islam they're being taught, the conditions that Hamas has kept them in by holding back all the international aid that was given over the years to build Gaza, but some of it clearly is attributed to the incessant indoctrination that the Jewish people have no connection to the land. Israel's enemies even changed the name of the city of David to Wadi Khilwe, stripping away any reference to its true history and claiming it as their own. Today, the stakes could not be higher. As we know, Iran is racing towards nuclear capability. Whether there's a deal or no deal, it's just a matter of 2 weeks until they get it. They're threatening Israel and the United States almost daily with attacks. The Houthis in Yemen are shooting ballistic missiles. Can you imagine having ballistic missiles landing near your home? They're launching surface-to-surface missiles at Israel, one of which landed at Ben Gurion Airport. And Israel, as we know, recently carried out an aerial strike over 1,000 miles away in Yemen. We've struck Iran, removing their entire aerial defense. This is a reminder of just how far this reaches. The Middle East is in flux, but so are your university campuses in the West. This is not just a war over land. This is a war for truth. And in a time of chaos and confusion, the one thing we need is the clarity of who we are, why we are here, and what we are fighting for in Israel, as Jews, or as Israel supporters, all throughout the world. Whether you're an Israeli soldier, you're a Jewish student on a hostile campus, or you're a lone supporter in your crowd, your clarity matters, your courage matters, and your knowledge matters. That is why I wrote this book. If you're a parent or grandparent of children, a high school student or a college student, or just someone who wants to understand the truth behind the story and how you're trying to be deceived by Israel's enemies, how they show you only what has not been found and never what has been found, or they try to obscure Jewish evidence by labeling it as a settler attempt. Anytime you hear that, look a little bit deeper, look inside my book, and you'll see actually what they're trying to cover up. To Israelis, to Jewish students under attack on campus, to supporters of Israel across the world, When the Stones Speak is your guide to the truth. We are not outsiders. We are not colonizers. And while there are many people who may claim to be indigenous to their lands, remember this. No people on earth are more indigenous to any land than the Jewish people are to the land of Israel. That matters, because if our enemies are right about what they're saying about us, and if we are imposters, then you know what? We don't belong here. But inconveniently for them, they are wrong. And when we listen closely to the stones of Jerusalem, when we let the stones speak, they answer with one voice. We were here, we never left, and we are home today in Israel.